What was that,
Should
sorry?
now have base, tempest, and lunar. And try filling bright here very shortly.
I think we've got just about every account. Everyone's fucking good to go, I think. For the most part, anyway.
Got everybody out. This looks like anyway.
Ah, we got someone coming in. All right, and then send this to bright. Whatever's left. Then pop up Elm. Elm can do Lunar Comet. Just to try and get as many troops spread out as possible, really. Oh, this is kinda underwhelming. I was at least hoping they'd show up. You know?
They're kind of, I don't know what I would describe it as, but they're either going to show up at last minute or they're not going to show up at all. But 24 minutes on the clock. Possible, I guess. It doesn't matter to me because at the end of the day, I'll wind up turn around and see if we can hit some of their fucking guys anyway. I don't care too much. If we get forts and base again, then that's their loss.
Well, I mean, the way I'm looking at it right now is what we've had it for a month, right? We've had base for a fucking month now. Which for a guild of our size in the kingdom we're in is pretty fucking good.
Yeah, I don't know why.
We're barely 50 bill by ourselves.
Yeah, I mean we're not nothing too special. I don't entirely know this Peta Motores guy from Stacia. He's only 1.2 billion. Do you know if that guy's got any troops?
I have no idea.
I just know he's been sitting like on that corner looking all pretty. Only 125 million kills, and just happens to have a CDK leader.
Wait, who's he got? Has he got that ROM 75 again?
No, it's some fucking Honoran or something. Go back.
Oh, right.
Kruger in. Oh, well, for now. At school in the morning. Well, here it's like 12:39 in the morning on the 4th of July. Thankfully, I can now report, though, that the fireworks have finally come to a dimmer. It's not as bad as it was. The other thing, too, is I did watch Indiana Jones a long ago.
You enjoy it?
You know, it's a good callback to the old films, but it is kind of not as good, I think, as some of the originals. It's got its own cling, you know, which is to say that it's definitely like if you watched it, you would know which one it. When people ask which one you're talking about, they would know almost immediately. But overall, for a film, I didn't hate it, but it's just not. I think my only problem with it really is that, like a lot of the Indiana Jones films, it's always strayed farther and farther away from where it originally came from. And this one, there were a lot of points at which I went, bullshit. And I kept saying that one too many times for me to like finally can kind of grasp her. Because I've always found that Indiana Jones was more focused on the historical fact. And then they kind of strayed away from that with some of these newer films that it's, you know, it's not the historical fact so much as it's the what if factor of those films. And while I don't hate the what if factor, because I think that's what makes the film special, there's also a certain point where you start to go, okay, hold up. Like for example, and like just let this sink in. Do you think a horse can go down subway stairs? Can that even be done? Can a
Yeah,
horse go down subway stairs? I don't think so.
I mean, no, definitely not. I don't see it happening, to be honest.
You know, and then take one step further. Okay. Now imagine it trying to outrun a fucking subway train. Like, okay.
Yeah, I really
Like,
do not see
now
that.
we're really pushing it, you know, and it's like, okay, yeah, a little freedom of choice here, you know, and then, you know, there's other little details like, okay, you know, you're gonna jump across a building. Would you like to do that in high heels while you're at it, and land it, and not break your, you know,
Yeah,
your like? I don't think so. Like, there's a lot of that in that film where I was calling like, I don't think so. Like, and that is not to say that it was a bad film, but there was a lot of that kind of shit where I was like, what? No, I don't think so.
I've never really been a big Indiana Jones fan, to be honest. I just don't see the appeal to it.
I don't know. I think the biggest appeal that somebody had was it's, you know, you're basically flipping off the Nazis while as preserving archaeology,
Yeah.
and it's a big callback to, you know, the 40s and 50s, and it's, if anything, I think it's kind of like a history teacher's wet dream is what it is.
Mm.
And I think it's a really fair way of saying it. Because ultimately, it's just kind of rebranding a couple of things. And back when they had, of course, now we don't really have a lot of the cast members that made the original show. You know, it's like
No more Sean Connery.
there were some pretty good
Sorry,
cast
what?
members. I don't know. It's just one of those things
All the
that
best
it's
movies.
tragic.
All the best movies came out in the 80s.
Back in the ancient days.
Oh, that's not long ago.
80s was 20 years before I was born. What do you mean it's not that long ago?
You know, you're gonna start aging people pretty quickly when you tell people that. But here I'm like, you know, I was born in fucking 97, right? And just the other day, I realized that 2010 was only, oh, I don't know, like a little over a decade ago. And I'm like, no, no, it wasn't. No fucking way it was.
2016 was 7 years ago. 7 years ago, Trump became president.
And there's a lot of stuff like that that, you know, it's like, it doesn't settle well with me when I look back and I go, no way that's that long ago. And then you start to understand where people are coming from when they're like, oh, the 80s, oh, that wasn't that long ago. And it's like, yeah, but it was. It's just our perception of time is worse.
Yeah.
I think about the 80s and I'm thinking, okay, what were the people back in the 80s based on my time frame now? You know, like, oh, they're 40s or 30s.
I mean, if there's any real time travel, that is time travel to me. When people can go back to something like decades ago, and then they can recollect things that were from that point in time. Like, that is true time travel as far as going backwards in time. Now, people that claim that they can go forwards in time, which is an interesting concept in of itself, which is kind of the theme behind the Dial of Destiny, is that's, you know, that's what they play on, is the idea that, you know, we can go back in time and reverse history, but we could also go forwards in time and change the future, or come back to the present from the future. You know, which,
now we're talking my kind of science fiction.
you know, that's the theme within that particular flavor of Indiana Jones.
I will
That's
say, growing up, you know, I watched every Star Trek. It was from the original Star Trek, probably about 10 times over.
Jesus.
My time travel parts were probably my favorite scenes.
I will say that the few shows that I've seen that have tried to play on the time travel idea, like here recently, I think Marvel's kind of played on that quite a bit lately with their with a lot of their shows. Is that you get into like the multiverse and the concept that there's a world that can be infinitely tiny and even tinier than tiny, and then infinitely so tiny that eventually you find yourself in a world of dimensions that ultimately leads into a whole cascade of different possibilities within the same realm. And it's like, okay, their explanation for why there could be many different variations of the same thing is the same way you would approach a water droplet. Which is to say that a single water droplet can be combined with another water droplet, and millions of different water droplets all add up to make a even bigger water droplet that all adds up into an ocean. It's like that principle is effectively what those shows like to hound in. But I liked the shows where, that the principle in something like a wormhole, for example, or or even a black hole, for example. They like to emphasize the fact that, like, well, for example, like in Lilo and Stitch, for example, I always thought it was interesting that the scientist in the movie is like, well, how do you time travel? He's like, well, here's what you do. Rather than, jump into a small black hole, because that'll get you crushed. If it's tiny, you have a tiny hole, therefore you're tiny, you get crushed. You need big black holes so that you have enough room in the hole for you to escape through it untouched to get to the other side.
Dude, that's my favorite type of porn. Big black holes.
Yeah. What I will say about it, though, is that
like a physicist.
yeah, that's what I thought was interesting about it, was that and that was a cartoon show, right? But the main thing that I got out of that, though, was when they actually traveled through it. He's like, okay, now here's the thing: we didn't travel through time; we just saved a shitload of time because we traveled to where we wanted to go. Which I was like, oh, okay, so that makes a lot more sense when you understand a wormhole from that context. It's like we can bend space to get to somewhere faster, and if we travel through a wormhole, it's not that we're actually bending time to its will so much as that we're actually saving time to get somewhere, which warps the way we perceive time in space. Which I was like, okay, now that I can understand, because what you're really saying is, rather than say, if you're like standing and walking, right, you're going 60 miles an hour, but then you get on a bullet train that's going 100 miles an hour, you're going to get to two different places at a completely different speed. But if somebody told you that instead of, getting on that bullet train, and instead you got all the way up into space, jumped on a rocket, and then bounced back on the other part of the Earth, it would be faster. It's effectively the same line of logic that they're trying to apply there. And it does, to some extent, I think there is actually some truth in what they're trying to get across. It's just a lot of people look at that and assume that that also means you can bend time, when time is more of a constant. It's not something you can bend. You can't make time go backwards, but you can also not make it go forwards. And therefore, the concept that time itself as a numeric entity that can be bent to its will is kind of more of a figment of people's imagination, which is fine until it gets a little out of hand and people start thinking that if they can bend time, then they can, they can. There is the principle that I always thought was interesting, which was that after a certain point within gravity and magnetism, you can bend the laws of physics to the point where there are new rules that can be created from within a set of rules that you've defined. Meaning that, like, if gravity is incredibly strong, you can reverse the polarity of gravity. Or, the concept of, like, antimatter, for example. is the concept that
Dude, that shit, you're just hurting my head.
I know
You're
The
really starting to feel
more you go
this
on and
is
on about it, it just hurts my head more.
it gets overtly more complicated.
my old engineering days.
Yeah.
Bringing back my old college engineering days, and I used to sit there and think about accelerating on a rocket and how fast you can go, and how that would affect time, and man, now I got old, I don't think about that stuff anymore.
Yeah. Well,
Now you
I mean,
try to
but
remember where you put the walking stick, huh, Scooter?
What's that?
Now you try to remember where you put the walking stick, huh?
Oh yeah, no, I can't remember anything anymore.
Well, you at least
I don't
remember
know.
to show up for a while, which is good.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of what I said sounds like a bunch of rubbish. The only thing I guess that can be said about it that does have some meaning behind it, I guess, is the concept that antimatter is effectively the concept of if a neutron, for example, is neutral, an electron is negative, and a proton's positive, right? The idea would be to reverse the polarity of all of those objects. So electrons become positive, protons become negative, and neutrons, for some mysterious fucking reason, still remain neutral. And I've never fully grasped why exactly that was, and I don't know if the scientists have ever actually fully explained that. Because why is it that something remains neutral, irregardless of what the state of matter is in? Because that would imply that a neutron does not change at all. Which that doesn't make any sense. I think the secret sauce in dark matter starts and begins with the neutrons in the same way that neutrons are used in atom bombs. Because when you're dispersing in an atom bomb, all you've done is add more electrons to a neutron to turn it into something else, like a proton, or vice versa.
Yeah.
From what I remember, I believe that's what they're doing with neutron fission and a lot of the modern equivalences of like fusion. In some shape or form, they're applying some super intense situation where a neutron suddenly does something that it normally doesn't do. And it's like, okay, if we know that's the secret sauce, then we got to figure out what exactly that does. Now, like quantum computing and stuff like that, that's a fun subject because a lot of people understand computers.
What do you do for a living, can I ask?
What was that, sorry?
What do you do for a living, can I ask?
Oh, see, I work in IT, but I also I grew up around NASA scientists. Ended up working for NASA and lawyers. So I got to borrow their books, and when I was bored, I would pick their brain. Well, so the one that I talked to was working in quantum mechanics, and he was going to build the computers that would run simulations required to figure out, like, if let's say you wanted to know what a black hole generals, if you wanted to simulate it, like he was doing all the math required to be able to simulate it. But in order to do that, you have to know what a quantum computer is. And in some way, shape, or form, I don't know if I fully still grasp what a quantum computer is, but what I have understood about it is if you think about like imagine like there was a like a TV that has static. This new idea that they have out there.
You got supercomputers where I'm at, and they're all water cooled and all. But yeah, when I was working for Space Command, we had a big old Cray system out there at Falcon Air Force Base, and they were doing a bunch of the Star Wars stuff on it. That was back in the '90s. I originally I was part of the program management for Global Positioning System back when nobody knew what GPS was.
Yeah.
In the '90s, and I was in Colorado Springs. I worked
Yeah,
on
it's
several satellite systems. I worked
pretty
on
crazy.
the DMSP Defense Meteorological Satellite Program, and And I've been to Cape Canaveral. I used to do a lot of TDYs to Cape Canaveral back in the 90s.
Yeah. I always thought it was kind of
But,
fascinating that a lot of like modern GPS systems nowadays that we actually have too many satellites. Because I only know this because I happen to work for a pivot company, and a lot of the software and stuff that they write nowadays, they have to create systems where you can run a pivot system automatically. And in order to do that, you have to go out and fetch information from satellites. And there actually comes a point where if you get too many satellites, you get too many coordinates, and that's too much information for a single CPU to handle, and it crashes it.
Yeah, back in the old days, we only had 18 birds in the constellation back on the Block 2Rs or the Block 2s. They came up with the Block 2Rs, but now the system, when the system transmits, it transmits all your coordinates of all the other satellites in the constellation. And now we used to contact each satellite one at a time because we had to calibrate it stuff with the we had monitor stations. We had to use I forgot the math we used, but now they're all networked together, so they can keep it all they can keep it all calibrated. But I was part of the ground control segment, and we had the satellite systems over at Ascension Island, Diego Garcia, and Kwajalein. And then our pre-launch compatibility station was over there in Cape Canaveral. So I used to make a lot of trips to the Cape and stuff, but the master control station was in Colorado Springs. And I pretty much learned a lot that I could about GPS back then. Then I came back to tinker and started working on back on the bombers again.
Don't give away too many state secrets, Scooter. Both of us are streaming.
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot more than I knew. I'm not going to talk about things I don't remember because I completely just, I'll just say I forgot them.
I don't know. On the completely different subject, the quantum mechanics. The only thing that I gleamed out of talking to the quantum mechanics guy that I talked to, anyway, is that he basically told me that they want to take power or electricity out of the equation. Instead of running power onto a silicon board, which is nothing more than a voltage that's changing a number to be 1 or 0 based on the voltage, that they thought, well, instead of doing that, you could change the state of a single proton or a single piece of, and they call it a qubit, but by being able to measure, imagine like if, for example, you're looking at a TV screen that's got black and white static. It changes it and frequently flickers all the time. And now imagine for a moment that you stick a magnet to it and all of the, sides will turn black and all the other sides will turn white. And by forcibly changing that state, you could then, repeatedly go back to it because if you put a magnet to it, it's always going to be black. But then if you add, say, something that isn't magnetic to it, then that pixel becomes white. So you can store matter. And then if you take the magnet away, naturally the screen goes back to fuzz. So then you can put a fucking magnet to it. It all goes black except for those white pixels. And then you basically have created something that no longer requires power to do ones and zeros, which means the calculations then no longer become dependent on the amount of electricity that you're using. Which then means
old TTL logic.
What I thought was interesting about that too is that they're also doing it at a very, very small scale. So then the space is infinitely bigger along with it. Which it's like, okay, that's a little mind-boggling to think about because they're trying to do something that is at a very tiny scale. Which I was like, man, I hate to be the asshole that walks by with a backbone thing because that's going to fuck all sorts of shit up. Meanwhile, there's also the other, I think there was like another camp of people in quantum mechanics that were like, well, we could just store it in DNA. What do you mean you could store it in DNA? And they're like, yeah, you could store it in DNA. Because apparently proteins and shit like that, you could, assign fucking A, B, C, D, E, F, G to a certain protein, and different proteins are different colors, and therefore you can assign numbers to those proteins, and strands can be infinitely long and can be stored in a piece of DNA and therefore copied and cloned and duplicated because of cells, and therefore another form of which that you could then store information. Both concepts both rely on an idea, though, that they're stripping electricity out of the equation.
You're a pure physicist. So you're a pure physicist.
That's not even pure physicist. This is literally just me reading off excerpts off of other people's work and getting a gist of what it is exactly that they're talking about. Like trying to distill it in a way that makes sense to me. And that's two of the major ideas that I've heard of. That, like, if I had to make any sense of, that's effectively what they're trying to do. But the goal is pretty much the same. The issue is that silicon and nanotechnology can only go so far. And they're finding problems in that, and even now you notice this with computers, because they get too hot. That's because you got too much electricity running in one place. And then the other problem is stability. You can't maintain all of that in such a small space, cramped into one place. And then you add on to the fact that you've also got the issue of, at least in modern computing anyway, now they do things in layers. So now you've got people that are doing like hard disk drives that are multiple layers or multiple disks thick. You've got SSDs and NVMe drives, and that's effectively, a USB flash technology that they're just trying to make it smaller but also increase the space. It's just all the same problem. It all comes down to the same thing.
Man, it's come along so much since I got my my computer engineering degree. I graduated with my computer engineering degree back in 1985. So it's changed so much. It's always been hard to keep up with technology too.
Yeah, it gets ahead a lot faster than people realize. Like even now, that there are like encryption algorithms now that people are making based on quantum mechanics that are supposed to be quantum proof. And it's like everything up till now has not been quantum proof, which means that every modern country in the world right now that has a quantum computer can probably crack the secrets to the nuclear codes, or or even the inbound transmissions to every modern form of encryption that's used across many different things all over the world. The weird thing is that they talked about it as if it was no big deal, but like China is one of the only countries in the world right now that would probably have the motivation to do something like that at that scale. And I can't help but wonder at what point they thought that the United States hadn't already done it. Because it's not something that, I'm sure if we are just now hearing the beginning of it, it's probably been around for a decade or more. And it's just now becoming more common.
Over in Colorado Springs, that Martin Marietta used to run these Cray systems, and they used to do some amazing stuff with that system. But it was calculating inbound trajectories and responses and stuff like that. And they came up with we can develop a system for defense and stuff and defense shield, but they can't respond fast enough back then. I guess now they probably can.
I mean, and there's a lot of people that'll say that China's already done it and so on and so forth, and it's like, even still, I only bring that up because it's a fun thing to think about, because it goes to show that the world is getting outpaced by something that, I mean, hell, even now people are stupendified by AI in a way. That's all the craze nowadays. But that's not all that complicated. Because really all that's involved in AI, really, at a very basic level, is it's given a set of parameters. In this case, I think like the Chat GPT bot that a lot of people have found interesting is around 100 million parameters. A single GPU on your computer can usually do about 1 million. So they've got a little over like 100 of those running in a server somewhere, and probably daisy chaining multiple servers to do calculations that are required to make that AI work the way it does. But it needs a gigantic amount of knowledge and databases and queries to make it. And hell, I was just having a conversation with somebody today. They're like, how does Google have all of this information stored on their servers that you can query it when you go to Google search? And it's like, they don't. What they have instead is they actually go out. They might have a database that queries the very minimum amount of information required to get somebody's query answered, and the rest of it is pulled from the servers for which it's actually querying it from. And that's why it's called a web browser. So it doesn't necessarily store that information at any point at all. It's actually, if anything, scraping it on the fly. Which is part of the reason why it just blows people's minds. I, for one, just can't help but wonder at what point people will finally see to the fact that your knowledge is not in any way private these days.
That TikTok guy is empty.
Well, so much for that.
Yeah.
Oh, damn it.
Well, all my alts are put to bed.
At this point, I'm just looking for shit to burn. That's all I'm looking for.
Mm.
I'm hoping I can find something just by the off chance of poking around and finding it, but I may be reaching for something that may never arrive. I don't know.
Hey, Scooter, you remember that 1.9 bill we zeroed?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
His guild's leaving the kingdom. His guild's fucking leaving.
Yes, he don't like you no more.
No, I really don't think that's really not an illogical thing to do, right? If the biggest guy next to you gets zeroed, the first thing that comes to mind is, fuck this place, I'm gonna die, let's leave. You know, like, who wouldn't want to pack up their bags when the guy next to them like that is big as he is, gets fucking flattened? I'd be looking for a way out, I know that much.
The entire time. He was in gear the entire time. So that's what makes it even better. Was that he was fucking, he thought he was safe, and then he just got absolutely demolished.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a part of me that when I looked at that report, I was a little alarmed at that, because I looked at the first report and I was like, okay, yeah, that didn't look pretty. But then every report after, it's like, yep, somebody should have been online that day.
Literally, he got no reins from his guild. If he got reins, that would have been on the verge of, if not unbreakable. Because he had a fucking thick comp. He's empty as well, Dakota, that corn guy.
Yeah, I thought as much. I was just looking to see if there's any indication that his gear was maybe something good, but never mind.
Let me check my bookmarks here.
Right now, I'm trying very hard not to accidentally hit anybody or scout anybody that doesn't need to just be scouted. One thing that always throws me off is I see WNP and WWP, and the first thing that I want to do is click WNP, realizing, oh wait, that's not the same one. Don't touch, don't click.
Those are our friendly ones.
Trying to separate them is kind of a challenge once in a while for me.
Yeah.
I'll pick it out of a crowd, and then I'll go, fuck, nope, not that one, nope.
Nothing seems to be unshielded in the WWP hive.
My cat's having a fucking conniption fit right now. She is not happy that I'm talking. What? Oh my god. She's just like, no, shut up. I'm trying to sleep here.
Dude, my dog tried to fucking push me off the bed last night. Cheeky little shit.
ONG Gia, is that from
Swimming
That's
left for
one of the
treats. I see how it
V18
is.
boys.
Damn it. She's just not, she's just fucking having a day. If anything, she's having a field day with my fucking, I don't know. One of these days it's probably going to come back to haunt me, but.
That's the reason we have a nap with the V18 now, is because they came and helped us one time during WoW. So kind of don't want to be hitting them if they help us.
These guys didn't even contend us at all. It's like, geez.
They spent all that time fucking hyping up their friends that they were gonna get.
Yeah, I've yet to see anything about that either. It's like, I don't know who their friends are, but they keep talking about them as if they're gonna show up. I just don't see.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all for it. If they got friends, bring your friends. Like, shit.
Bring your fucking friends, pussy.
I don't mind it. It's just, it's like, if you're gonna do it, I hate when people are like, it's almost kind of like when I would almost liken it to like Big Brother, in a way.
Yeah.
Just very, I'll get my big brother on you, don't you dare, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, well, I'll wait and see, until they show up. I guess you're just bluffing, like, throw it on to the high mountain, because it's not really, doesn't really mean anything.
No.
Yeah, this game's just all about Bitcoin to me.
What exactly is it about Bitcoin in this game? How did you get Bitcoin and this tied together? That's my question.
Nothing.
Now, are you a firm believer Bitcoin's going to go to 40K?
Oh yeah, yeah.
You think it'll make it? Do you think it'll make it to 40K by the end of the year?
I think it will. I think it's going to make the 40K and it'll back off, and then when it gets and then when the halving starts in March of 2024, you're going to see by the end of 2025 it's going to top, because it's done the same thing 3 times, and right now you got all these institutions just jumping in like crazy right now.
Yeah, they're probably starting to see the value in it. Yeah. I always thought that was kind of sign for trouble, though, because I'm looking at it more pragmatically. I'm looking at that going, why else would you do that if you didn't already think that the stock market was going to crash? So then you immediately start dumping your institutional assets into something else like Bitcoin as a hedge against the very market that you're afraid is going to crash. But yet, a lot of these spot ETFs are based in the stock market, which then made me sit here and ponder, okay, but Bitcoin's not backed by anything. And you're about to have a bunch of institutional investors bet on the price of something that is not backed by anything, and is frequently referred to as a cryptocurrency. And I'm sitting here going, I've heard of something like this before, and it looks a lot like 2008 to me. It's just waiting to, spill over in the next 5 years.
Bitcoin came about because of 2008. 2008.
No, but what these spot ETFs are going to do is going to recreate something very, very similar to what happened in 2008. I don't trust these spot. I really do. I would rather invest in Bitcoin than these spot ETFs that they've got coming out, because they sound just about as sketchy as shit to me.
We want the spot ETFs because that'll bring in the funnel all the money from Wall Street into Bitcoin, and they can build the market.
Yeah, but see, that's the problem. You get all the institutional funding that comes in from the institutions, and then someone somewhere will cause that whole thing to crash, and when they get scared, that sucker's gonna crash, and it's gonna crash hard. There won't be a full stop either. It'll take the whole fucking market down with it, is my fear. It'll be, and I mean, it's not that Bitcoin will be the end all, it still has what I describe as rarity, so it's not like it'll be the reason, but I have a feeling institutional investors could be the ones to blame for it to drop a large amount of money. It'll go all the way, it'll be like what happened recently. It went up to like 60K, and then there was a sudden panic, and then it dropped all the way down to 20K. My fear is something like that will happen again.
That's the way the cycle goes. It goes into the accumulation, into markup, and it tops out, goes into the markdown and bear market, and then back into accumulation again. And we're already in markup again, and the cycle's restarting. And everybody's getting ready for the the halving, and that halving. There's only 21 million Bitcoin. That's all you can ever make, and you can't make anymore. You can't change the subroutines. It's programmed money, and it's very volatile. Yeah, I agree. It's very volatile.
I know you say you can't cheat it, but yet I still sit here and think about all the people that probably still have a Bitcoin wallet on Silk Road somewhere and that they just haven't activated yet. Like, well, I know that someone somewhere has it because there's no accident that shit doesn't exist. It absolutely exists.
Satoshi has the most Bitcoin. That wallet's been over there, been sitting over there, and doing nothing for years.
I know, but imagine if Satoshi just woke up one day and said, I think I'm going to take all the Bitcoin and sell it for X and X amount of money. What do you think that would do overnight?
Oh shoot, yeah, he would bring it all down.
That's just it. Even though it would take a substantial amount of it to do something at that. But I'm afraid there's multiple different Satoshis out there. That all it would take is one Satoshi big enough to scare another Satoshi into doing it. That it's a domino effect where you just scare one Satoshi and another Satoshi follows suit, and then it just goes. Don't get me wrong. I think people have a fear of missing out, but they also have a fear of losing everything. And I'm not sure which is stronger. But I don't know. I'm always an optimist and at the same time a pessimist when it comes to cryptocurrencies. And they say the same thing about Ethereum and other currencies, and it's just I for one would rather trust Bitcoin than I would Ethereum, only because from my experience, I've watched as Ethereum went from $600 to $3,000, and now it's like $2,000. So I would expect it probably to get to 3K the same way I would expect, Bitcoin to go for 30K to 40K. The problem I have with Bitcoin is it takes a substantial amount of capital to see those gains in any meaningful way for me. Whereas if I was to spend the same relatively amount of capital into something like Ethereum and say it got even remotely close to the same price range, the percentage gain would be astronomically higher than what I could ever do with Bitcoin. But it's also more riskier, I think, because of the fact that a lot of the government seems to treat it more like a security than it is a commodity, which is kind of weird because I don't know how they can decipher what is and isn't a commodity any more than it is a security when it comes to cryptocurrencies, because I always thought they all kind of fell into the same camp. But
treated Bitcoin as a commodity. They haven't even tried to say Bitcoin is a security, but
not yet,
I think
as far as we know.
Just trying to make Ethereum try to say it's secure. Ethereum is as a security, and they're trying not to because I think the government knows that. All the big players know that there's too much application involved in Ethereum. It just hasn't come to play yet.
When it does, to me, is that a bunch of the Walmart big bosses sold. I think it was $20 million worth of Walmart stock recently, and same with Coke. Someone high up on the Coke chain sold a couple million worth of Coke stock, which I cannot see any particular reason why, other than they know something big's about to happen.
Right, there's a recession on the inbound, and there's a lot of concern about it, and really where the dollar is going to go. The dollar at some point is probably going to go into the garbage can.
I know. I've always looked at what Warren Buffett does to kind of make just an assessment of what's going to happen. And the guy's got all of his money in Apple. and all of his money in a petroleum company. And all of those things have one thing in common. They're all things that we're running out of.
Yeah.
Which tells me a lot about what he expects the world to effectively blow up into. It's all the things that we're running out of are effectively going to become more expensive. And thereby, the companies that are paying a dividend that are also in control of things that there are very few of, and simultaneously are a monopoly in their own business in some way, shape, or form, are probably going to retain their value over time. Like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like, reasonable, but yeah, hey, you compare that to something like Bitcoin, where it's more of a speculative investment than an actual, an investment you could like look at and claim it's worth X, Y, and Z because of X, Y, and Z is physically there. Whereas Bitcoin is this digital product that everybody treats it like it's something that doesn't have any physical value to it, but yet you got an entire country that is backing their entire lifeblood and currency behind it. And that's always baffled me.
Yep.
Alright,
Yeah,
now,
mhm.
a little bit off track, but it's very important. What should the kingdom message be, boys?
WWP are sore losers and need to leave.
I've had it. I've had it to show me your titties for the last week and a bit. I think it's time for something new.
Good. You could always
See,
poke
I don't want to
fun.
attack the whole of WWP because it's not their entire guild. It's literally just Bull, who's been shit talking Kingdom Chat all the time.
You want to direct something personal at someone rather than
Yes.
flag an entire group of people is a problem. Okay.
Yes.
I'm not going to contribute in that because that'll make me look bad. But I will say that if
Okay, well, just talk to me once you've finished streaming.
I could say something, but it's gonna come off sounding like I don't know. I guess the only negative thing I'm going to say is that Lucifer thinks very highly of himself. That's about all I'm going to say on that subject matter. There's a nice name, Lucifer, and him thinking highly of himself. Actually describes him rather quite well.
Yeah. I think Bull is a pussy is just nice and to the point.
Okay. So you're just gonna taunt him, basically.
I
Alright.
don't know if I am. If he wants to spend an entire day in Kingdom Chat talking about how he's going to get his friends to come fight us, and then
You should
do
just
nothing.
no. What you need to do is then point out where those friends are. I'd like to see who those people are. Am I wrong? Should we not emphasize that?
You do have a point, but there's no way they're gonna fucking show anyone up.
I know, and that's the thing. So do you just go below the belt in a sense and kick them in the balls where it hurts or what?
Literally, the only friends they'd have a chance of making is CL, but no one likes CL, so that's just fitting that together. You know?
Yeah, it's up to you how you want to word it. I'm gonna just have to.
I think keeping Bull as a pussy is good for now.
I don't know why, but there is a very strange theme I'm starting to see. We're the only ones that are really doing anything meaningful with their accounts, and everyone else seems to be sleeping, gelding behind the wonderful bubble. Ah, man.
No, W and P come out as well, but they're our allies, so it's not like we can hit them.
I'm just pointing out the obvious that all the people that you want to hit can't be hit. So it's like, oh, gotta wait until they get apt to be hit, I guess.
If they ever come out.
Doesn't look like that's definitely going to happen anytime soon.
Doesn't, does it?
So I can bring my main account, my alt back over to home base. It's all nice and tidy.
God damn it. That Ziz guy left the kingdom.
Oh, he didn't
God
really
damn
stay
it.
around for very long, did he?
No.
Shame. I was hoping we
Yeah.
could zero him.
Same. That was what? He had 36 mil as well, or something?
Ooh.
He had 30 mil. 30 mil. So that would have been a second fat zero.
Yeah, so that
But he
would
was a
have been
massive
pretty good.
range rap, I think. I'm pretty sure he's a range rap. Based on his comp.
No, I would say, given the circumstances, I think this is probably a good wrap for the stream, since I don't think there's a whole lot to say. So, for those of you who watch the stream,
So
thank you guys for dropping by. And, yeah.